Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday Eve. I hope that everyone is in a warm space, and there's a little bit of sunshine shining here. So, welcome again to our 2026 legislative kickoff. I have the pleasure of being the CEO at Forefront for a little over 5 years now, and I just want to bring some grounding as a welcome to this event. While I know we all want to put forth our best effort at solving some of the things that are happening in our country right now. It's not lost on me that it's heavy. So everything that's happening in this world and how we respond to it is just a light for us to sort of move. I wrote a piece in a blog not long ago about lights at the end of the tunnel. And I referenced there's no light at the end of the tunnel, just a turn to another tunnel to find another light. And so I offer that to you all today as we talk about what to expect in 2026 and the partners that you're going to hear today about all that we're pulling together and just inviting you in to be a piece of finding the light at the next turn in the tunnel. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your dedication to the sector. There's so much happening, and I understand we're not going to solve it all today, but we're going to give it our very, very best try this year and into the next. So the plans that you hear today are for us to think about over the years. So with that said, I look forward to hearing more, and I look forward to all of y'all's engagement, not just today, but throughout the years. And I am going to turn it over to Yana.
Good morning, Good morning, everyone. Okay, great. Thank you, Monique, and thank you, Holly, and to all of the Forefront team for getting us organized and really engaged in a way that helps represent the important work that the nonprofit sector does in Illinois and in Chicago and really across the country. You all have demonstrated so much leadership and championing this important role that we play in meeting the needs of our community and really driving towards a more equitable, inclusive society. We truly are the independent sector, and we are the place where we can come together and have a voice in the things that are happening in our communities. It's been quite a year for the nonprofit sector with executive orders, administrative actions, and legislation at every turn that really seeks to disrupt our ability to serve communities most in need. Whether it's formal legislation like H.R. 1 with significant changes to the safety net, SNAP, Medicaid, or simply canceling grants or on a whim changing funding opportunities like the recent HUD Community Continuum of Care grant program. And even if these things don't come to fruition and they result in legal challenges that in the end don't change anything, at least in the short run, it is incredibly disruptive to the work that we do. And so the way that we organize ourselves and use our voice is critically important. And I'm really proud of the nonprofits in Illinois who are standing up, joining lawsuits and challenging actions to protect the care and nurturing we do in our communities. And so there's no more important time for all of us to come together around this legislative agenda that Forefront is leading. And I'm really proud to serve as chair of the Forefront Policy Committee as board member. And I very much look forward, and there is no more important time for us all to gather at Foundations on the Hill in about a month. And I'm looking forward to joining you all there. And I think I will turn it either back over to Monique or to the team to move on to the next portion of our agenda. But just want to express my thanks to all of you for being here on this call today. I see there's 85 of us here today, and that really is a testament to the important work that we have to do together. So thank you all, and I'll hand it over.
You hand it to Sebastian. Thank you, Yana.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Yana, Monique. Good morning, everybody. We have an amazing agenda today with partners here in Illinois and also in Washington, D.C. Thanks everyone for being here. So first, I'll be going over an introduction of the panelists that we have today virtually. We'll be providing an overview of Forefront and what we do, and then we'll be diving into the 2026 federal agenda as well as a state agenda in terms of policy. We'll be hearing from our panelists. nationwide and also based here in Illinois. We'll have time for questions after the federal agenda as well. As Hallie mentioned earlier, just try to drop those questions in the chat or hold them until we get to the Q&A slides in the respective program. But feel free to drop comments and questions as well throughout the presentation this morning, as you know there's going to be a lot of information for folks to keep track of. And then next slide. Thank you. Back one slide. So we have an amazing roster of panelists today. We'll begin with Matthew L. Evans. Matthew is the Vice President of Advocacy and External Relations at the United Philanthropy Forum, the largest and most diverse network in American philanthropy. Matthew has over 15 years of experience in public policy and government relations, and he has been instrumental in expanding the forum's advocacy work, championing philanthropy's collective voice to drive systems change. Before joining the forum, Matthew led public policy efforts at Philanthropy Southeast and held multiple advocacy roles in DC, working with elected officials, corporations, and national organizations. Also in DC, but I think from Illinois as well, originally, is Travis Swanson. Travis is Manager of Government Relations at Independent Sector, leading congressional engagement for the charitable sector. Travis has over a decade in nonprofit advocacy, including time at Planned Parenthood and the Human Rights Campaign, and he brings a wealth of legislative expertise. He holds a BS from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and serves as an elected advisory neighborhood commissioner in Washington, D.C. We also have Erin Slone from the Illinois State Treasurer's Office, where she serves as Deputy Director for Outreach. Erin has over 15 years in public finance, investment banking, and 8 years consulting for fintech startups. She now markets state programs to governments and businesses. She is also an elected village trustee in Park Forest, and Erin holds a degree from the University of Chicago and Northwestern as well. We also have today Jared Hoffman. Jared is the Senior Legislative Associate for State Government Affairs at Jewish United Fund. He has been at JUF full-time for 3 years now. In Springfield, Jewish United Fund advocates for a diverse array of issues, primarily involving health and human services, early childhood education, and community service initiatives as well. Jared graduated from George Washington University with a degree in political science. And last but not least, we have the amazing Naya Kelly. Naya attended Loyola University, Chicago, where she receives her bachelor's, master's, and Juris Doctorate degrees. She is currently the Director of State Legislative Equity and Transformation at the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness. Her work focuses on the Illinois state budget, homeless education, public benefits, youth homelessness, and housing insecurity policies. In her work, she has written and advocated several pieces of legislation, including providing new housing opportunities for all, for minors, and is expanding the value that housing is a human right. And then with that, I will transition it over to my colleague, Lacey.
Good morning, folks. I'm Lacey Winfield, the policy coordinator here at Forefront. And before I dive into who we are as Forefront, this is our most recent photo of our outing as a team. We went golfing. It was quite an experience. If you want to see more fun photos and more what we do as Forefront as a whole, you can find us at our LinkedIn and Instagram and other social media accounts. So Forefront is the Illinois State Nonprofit and Foundation Membership Alliance. We kind of educate, convene, and mobilize the sector as a whole from statewide. So we go the entire state of Illinois. Our members include individuals, operating nonprofits, and grant makers. Some of our benefits that we offer to our memberships are job board, peer networks, peer skills share, and a bunch of other variety of things that we offer to them. Everything is based on a sliding scale. So operating nonprofits can pay as low as $65. And as well for operating nonprofits outside of Chicago. To learn more, we have a no obligation virtual member orientation that you can learn more about what we do as Forefront as a whole. Next slide. So here are some of the services that we offer at Forefront. One of them is being our Philanthropy Club, Equitable Access and a Capacity Initiative. We do a Racial Equity Collective, Mission Sustainable Initiative, and our Public Policy and Advocacy. The best way to stay abreast of what we're doing on the public policy and advocacy is signing up for our Action Center. That way you all kind of know what's going on and what we are working on as a whole. So some of the forefront public policy programs. So we are a membership for a lot of the national organizations. Two of our organizations will be here today from United Philanthropy Forum and Independent Sector. And we work closely with these organizations based in Illinois and on a federal level to see what we're working on, to make sure that we're working on stuff closely with what is aligned in the sector. Um, for excuse me, for some of our state level things, again, we work closely with folks like Nia Kelly and Jared Hoffman to make sure that the policy that we're working on aligning with the sector as a whole. And so I am going to move it over to Holly to discuss the 2025 highlight reels.
Hi again, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for being here. As Monique acknowledged at the beginning, 2025 was a really tough year, but it was also productive in some ways for our team. And we'll share some key links about what's shown here in chat shortly. In 2025, both the Court of Claims and the Attorney General launched new online systems to support the charitable sector, which is a great step forward. And legislatively in 2025, we successfully passed the first update to the Government Accountability and Transparency Act, or GATA, since that act was first put into place over 12 years ago. And that fell under our government contracting reform efforts, which we're going to cover in more detail later in the program when we discuss our state agenda. Forefront also previously in 2024 helped pass the Illinois Gives tax credit, which we are pleased to see completely maxed out in its first year in 2025. That program drove $20 million into charitable endowments across Illinois last year. And now that same amount is available for tax year 26 as we're in a new tax year. And the monies in those endowments can grow over time, especially as donors continue to make gifts to causes they care about. So we want to make sure folks know about that and that you use that as a tool to support causes that are important to you, which would include things that maybe historically haven't benefited from tax policy around racial equity, or groups that are working communities of color, led by persons of color. So we want to encourage folks to take a look at that program. We also saw a key federal win last year with the inclusion of the non-itemizer charitable tax deduction at the federal level in H.R. 1, which was the notorious tax bill. And while most of that bill was opposed by Forefront and many of you, that was one bright spot. And we hope folks will take advantage of that in this new year to help raise money, especially as other federal funds are being cut. So we will share some resources related to these issues in chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our friend Matthew from United Philanthropy Forum, who's going to provide some key federal context for us. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you to Forefront. We value your membership and your leadership, so I appreciate you allowing me to be here today. First, I just want to acknowledge our friends and colleagues in Minnesota and what they're going through, and knowing that we continue to stand in solidarity with them, including the communities and nonprofits on the ground. And speaking to Forefront, and knowing also what you went through and what you continue to go through when it comes to the overuse of force in communities. And so we wanted to acknowledge that from the forum, and these are things that we're following at the national level. Just quickly, Sebastian eloquently put who the forum is, but I just wanted to sort of highlight what that means. Some of you may be familiar with us. We're based in Washington, D.C. We're sort of an association of associations. We call our members, who are associations, philanthropy infrastructure organizations like Forefront, who house foundations as their members. So collectively, we represent over 7,000 foundations across the country in almost every state and congressional district. The forum is keenly aware and keenly focused on many aspects of philanthropy, including philanthropic practice, being a convener and amplifier and bridge builder for leaders across the field. But we also focus on advocacy and public policy. What makes our work unique is that we believe in both a strong sector, but also strong and vibrant, healthy communities. And so we have our public policy lens focused squarely on both. We don't believe they're mutually exclusive. Actually, we believe they are interconnected. And so we also believe that philanthropy is uniquely positioned more than any other sector to be an advocate and voice for the communities that we work in and with. And so with that, we focus our public policy on those things exclusively. Um, I was just wanted to, I think the previous speaker talked about everything that happened in 2025, and I wanted to sort of talk about the fallout of 2025 and what it means for the sector going forward. And also, I like to ground some of these conversations in history. So it's important to note that everything that is happening to philanthropy, to nonprofits, to community is not by chance, it is by design. And I want to refer people back to the tax bill of 1969 that was signed by President Richard Nixon, then considered a law and order president. The tax bill of 1969, as many of you may know, sort of dictates how philanthropy operates today. And some of that, the way it was written, was to punish and to provide retribution to philanthropy for their involvement in the civil rights movement and the Voting Rights Act. So if you fast forward to 2020, post George Floyd, post racial equity, where philanthropy in their minds was all in on racial equity, what you're now seeing is the retribution dressed up as serious public policy proposals. And I think it's important to ground our conversation in history, knowing that these are the mechanisms in place driving what we are facing. And what we are facing, quite frankly, that started in earnest last year is a unprecedented convergence of threats. So we talked about earlier the executive orders that targeted the sector. If you read the language from those executive orders, it is targeting what they believe the work of the sector is. They called it DEI at the time, and that continues to evolve. And so you see a targeted impact of how they believe the sector works and how they think that how the administration and some in Congress, not all, believes they can go after the sector. And so we saw it named in those executive orders. We also saw a presidential memo last year that sort of tied some foundations to domestic terrorism. And we also saw the reconciliation package, which targeted foundations excise tax that would have taken $2.9 billion annually from communities across the country. I'm proud to say that with our work with partners like Forefront and other partners across the country, we were able to beat back that provision and have it stripped from the reconciliation package. Additionally, we were able to include the charitable act in the reconciliation package. But make no mistake, the reconciliation package, although it may include those incentives, it also makes the need for charity in communities more prevalent. And so taking away America's social safety net, cutting SNAP, cutting Medicaid, these things are all happening in a way that will transform fundamentally, no matter past this administration, it's already transforming the way philanthropy operates. And why? Because those things combined with the taking away federal grants from nonprofits then puts philanthropy in a position where we've told the federal government that, and we're trying to partner, but the amount of money that philanthropy has pales in comparison to what the federal government has. And so there will be a significant gaps to make up. And so we just want to sort of ground that reality of the convergence of threats that we're seeing and letting you know that these are not temporary. These will be sustained over time. And so it is really up to us to think both internally and externally about how we handle the ways going forward. And so I'll tell you what we've been doing at the forum as it relates to a legislative outlook for 2026. We know that we want to protect those wins. We know that we have members of Congress who are still investigating or looking to investigate the sector. Mainly, right now, we have the chairman of Ways and Means, Jason Smith out of Missouri, who recently sent a letter to the IRS calling on the agency to overhaul its tax exempt sector oversight, and he cited sort of the recent allegations in Minnesota as sort of the impetus or catalyst for that. And so we've also seen. I'm sorry, getting feedback. I don't know if people can push mute. That'd be great. We've also seen other things come out of Ways and Means, and so that's a main priority for us to continue to pay attention to what's going on there. And I mentioned sort of the executive orders as well. And additionally, what's going on in Congress right now is the appropriations battle. Last week, the House passed their final FY26 appropriations bill, sending them to the Senate ahead of tomorrow's deadline. But as you know, the situation on the ground in Minnesota has exasperated to a point where Democrats are now threatening to institute a partial government shutdown. The read this morning is that the White House and Senate Republicans are feeling the pressure and are amenable to some changes to mainly funding for DHS, mainly because of the public outcry and the public perception. And I think you saw this morning, they announced sort of a drawdown of troops in Minnesota. And so I think there is a small chance that there might be an agreement as Republicans are feeling the pressure, but there is also a chance that we will face a partial government shutdown. So that remains top of mind as we look to Congress. And then in addition to protecting our wins, making sure we're following the oversight and the money as it comes through appropriations. This is a short calendar year for Congress because the elections are coming up soon. And so typically when you have these midterm elections, Congress works mainly until August. And then after August, it's full election focused time. And so you won't see as much getting done after August. That being said, we've heard tea leaves about a small reconciliation 2.0 possibly happening. We don't see that moving forward. And so just wanted to ground you sort of in the reality of the calendar, so to speak, as it relates to this year when the elections are coming. And then finally, I will say, well, not finally, two more things. One of the things that we're doing in order to protect those wins, in order to to educate members of Congress about the sector, both nonprofits and philanthropy. I think one of the things that you're seeing, as I mentioned, the sector being targeted is because we don't really enjoy goodwill from the American public. Maybe locally you do, but what we're saying is, I think there was a study done, I think it was by Independent Sector a few years back, where sort of the approval rating for nonprofits is about in the 60s, but philanthropy was low 40s, upper 30s. And so what that creates is no community sympathy for philanthropy if they're being targeted, no matter the origin of those threats or targets. And so what we have to do as a sector, when I mentioned both the internal and external focus, is also work on narrative, telling our stories, making sure we are telling the stories, writing op-eds, working with our community partners to get the word out about the work that is being done. No longer, like higher education, no longer can philanthropy afford to live on reputation alone. We have to talk about the work that we're doing in communities, and we have to showcase it. And that's just a new reality. And what is happening right now is the opponents of the sector are doing a much better job of telling the story about the sector. And so what we did at the forum is work together with some partners over the last few months of 2025 as a part of the education effort to relaunch the Philanthropy Caucus. The Congressional Philanthropy Caucus is now back at the Hill. We have two co-chairs, one being from Illinois, Representative Danny Davis, along with Representative Blake Moore from Utah, Republican from Utah. They both sit on Ways and Means. They both have the ear of the entire committee. And what we're doing now in earnest is trying to get as many other members of Congress to join the Philanthropy Caucus. And that will serve as a springboard for us to continue to educate and build allies on the Hill. To that effect, we have a prime opportunity to do just that. March 16th through 19th, if you haven't registered already, we really encourage you to register for Foundations on the Hill. 2026 is a pivotal moment for the sector. Collective action is paramount. And so one of the main asks at Foundation on the Hill will be asking your member of Congress educating your member of Congress about philanthropy, nonprofits, their impact on communities, and for them to join the Congressional Philanthropy Caucus. We have also, as you know, Foundations on the Hill has evolved into a full public policy and advocacy conference, so that Monday and Tuesday, there will be full programming for you to meet colleagues across the sector from across the country, meet other leaders and advocates that are working together to amplify the cause of philanthropy and nonprofits in communities. And so we look forward to seeing you there. I'll stop there. Hopefully I didn't go over time.
No, you did great. Thanks, Matthew. We'll hand it off to Travis.
Hey, thank you, Holly, and thank you for having me here. As Sebastian said, my name is Travis Swanson. I am the Government Relations Manager at Independent Sector, and I'm not actually from Illinois. I grew up in Wisconsin, but I did spend all of my summers growing up in the Quad Cities. I still spend a lot of time there, have a lot of family there. I grew up Jewish. I go back home to the Quad Cities for Passover every year, so I do spend a lot of time in Illinois as well as in Chicago. So really happy to be here with you all today. So first, I was prepared to talk a little bit about the CR, but I think Matthew did a great job of covering that. Thank you, Matthew. First, I should probably just talk a little bit about Independent Sector. Similar to United Philanthropy Forum, we are also a membership-based organization of which Forefront is a member, and we do appreciate your membership and your invite to this and your partnership over the years. One thing that we are a little different from United Philanthropy Forum on is that our members are philanthropies and nonprofits and corporate giving programs. So it's a little more broad, but I will say we do a lot of overlap work. I work closely with Matthew. We're in a lot of spaces together, various meetings and things. And I will also be at FOTH and helping with that planning process. So look forward to seeing all of you at FOTH as well. So the first thing I was just going to talk about, I might go a little bit out of order here. I'm sorry about that for throwing the slides off. But first, I did want to talk briefly about the Small Nonprofit Retirement Security Act and why it matters so much for workers in the nonprofit sector. Years ago, Congress took an important step to strengthen retirement security for Americans. Through bipartisan action, lawmakers created a tax incentive to encourage employers, particularly small employers, to offer nonprofit retirement plans such as 401ks to their workers. The idea was simple and smart. If we want more workers to have access to retirement savings, we should help employers offset the cost of setting up and administering these plans. So Congress was absolutely right to prioritize this. Access to retirement savings is one of the most important drivers of long-term financial stability for working families. But there was a problem with the bill that they passed incentivizing this, and it was an unintended one. Nonprofits were accidentally left out of these incentives because nonprofits don't pay federal income tax, so they couldn't actually take advantage of the tax credit that Congress created. And as a result, millions of nonprofit workers were excluded from this benefit that Congress clearly intended to expand retirement access. So that's a pretty big deal because the nonprofit sector is not small. Nationally, about 10% of the workforce works in the sector, making it the third largest employer collectively in the country, behind only retail and government. In Illinois, that number is even just a little bit higher. About 11% of the workforce works in the sector statewide in Illinois. So the state is slightly above the national average. So these can be people like educators, some healthcare workers are in this, social services providers, you all on this call. And yet many of these employers or employees are lacking access to the same retirement benefits that their counterparts in the for-profit sector can get. So what this bill would do is it would close that gap. This is a bipartisan bill that allows nonprofits to take advantage of the same tax incentives for-profit employers are already using by applying the tax credit that the for-profits are getting and taking against their income tax liability and applying it towards their payroll tax liability instead. So this is just a small technical change that makes a huge practical difference. Finally putting nonprofits on equal footing and removing barriers that should have never existed in the first place. So what this bill would do, this bill is bipartisan. This bill was introduced in the Senate by Yes, in the Senate by Senator James Lankford and Senator Cortez Masto, a Republican and a Democrat. And then in the House, there are four sponsors, Republicans Vern Buchanan and Blake Moore, and Democrats Jimmy Panetta and Brad Schneider of Illinois are the lead sponsors on this. So we have a simple way that you can try to help get this across the finish line. We have a link here that I believe Lacey's going to drop into the chat that you can share you can use to share with your networks and let your lawmakers know that this bill matters. If you do live in Congressman Schneider's district, be sure to thank him for his leadership on this bill. And if you're in any other congressional district, to ask your members to sign on. Next, I just wanted to flag HR 6800 and explain why we're paying close attention to it. So HR 6800 would expand the federal government's authority to revoke nonprofit tax exempt status based on alleged ties to terrorism without adequate guardrails or due process protections. While the stated intent is national security, the concern is that the bill relies on vague standards and grants sweeping discretion that could be misused against lawful nonprofits organizations. A lot of this probably sounds familiar because this bill closely mirrors the 2024 HR 9495, which I'm sure many of you remember, raised significant alarms across the sector about just like the civil liberties and lack of due process that this bill takes. We knew that this bill was coming. Weren't sure when, but we knew it would pop back up. And because of that, we worked proactively well before introduction to educate lawmakers and make clear why this approach is dangerous. A key priority of us was trying to keep Democrats off of this bill and preventing the bipartisan momentum the bill seemed to have back in 2024. To date, that effort has been effective. HR 6800 was introduced as standalone legislation with zero co-sponsors. No Republicans or Democrats actually signed on to the bill this time in the House. And in the Senate, it was only introduced with one Republican co-sponsor. That outcome does reflect the early engagement and clear communication that our organizations have all had with the Hill, and highlighting the risks that this bill poses to the nonprofit sector. But the standalone bill is not the only threat in this space. We frequently see this language continue to resurface as riders on other end amendments, on other legislation. Most recently, we did see it appeared in last year's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, though that language was ultimately removed prior to final passage. That experience reinforces why vigilant matters. So we are monitoring this closely. HR 6800 by itself. We are also closely watching the language of all of these types of bills to see where this might reappear through amendments and riders and other must-pass legislative vehicles. So we continue to keep our IS members informed, and we'll continue to keep Holly informed and her team, and we'll flag opportunities for engagement as it arises. And then lastly, just want to say, I know Matthew touched a little bit on the continuing resolution. Just want to say Congress is working their way through the budget process. However, as we have seen, they have not yet passed it yet. Deadline to do that is tomorrow. I will say prior to the unjust murders of Alex Pretty and Renee Good, these bills were moving, and it was, honestly, the predictors were kind of saying there's only about, less than a 10% chance of a shutdown. It's probably not going to happen. Since those murders happened, we are now seeing some big fights on the Hill over DHS funding. And now it has skyrocketed to over an 85% chance of a shutdown. Obviously, a lot of things can change in the next 36-ish hours we have before that shutdown happens. But we don't know. We don't know what will happen quite yet. Still, this is just kind of reading the tea leaves. We're kind of in a different world now than we were even just a couple of weeks ago before, situations in Minnesota escalated. But as Matthew said, we're kind of starting to see some pullback in Minnesota right now. So hopefully, that will also play a role in this process, but we just don't know right now. I know that's kind of a non-update, but that's just kind of where things are. And lastly, how am I doing on time? Do I have time for one more? Okay, good. I'm always a little worried about that. So lastly, I just wanted to close by briefly highlighting just another bill that I've been talking about up on the Hill, which is the Volunteer Driver Tax Appreciation Act. So as of earlier this month, the standard mileage reimbursement rate increased up to 72.5 cents per mile. So that rate reflects the real cost of operating a vehicle, gas, maintenance, insurance, wear and tear. And it applies whenever you are driving for work at a for-profit company. But if you're volunteering for a nonprofit, the mileage reimbursement rate is still just 14 cents per mile, where it has been stuck since 1997. 1997, that is a long time ago. We're looking coming up on 30 years that this rate has been in place. And this disparity makes no sense. In fact, the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate has said as much, noting that it costs the same to operate your vehicle, whether you're driving your boss around for a for-profit employer or you're volunteering your time delivering meals for an organization like, for example, Meals on Wheels or other organizations that provide those types of services, or transporting seniors to medical appointments, or supporting disaster response efforts. Volunteer drivers are essential to many nonprofit operations, and I'm sure this is true for many of you on this call too. This is particularly true in rural areas and communities with limited transportation options, which I know Illinois is a state that has a lot of rural area. Yet the tax code has failed to keep up with the economic reality, effectively asking volunteer drivers to absorb the rising cost out of pocket that it costs them to operate their vehicle. So this bipartisan bill would fix this inequity by modernizing the charitable mileage rate and treating nonprofit volunteers more fairly. It's pretty straightforward. It's bipartisan. It was introduced in the Senate by Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, a Democrat, and Senator Ted Budd, a Republican from North Carolina, as well as in the House by Congresswoman Angie Craig, a Democrat from Minnesota, and Congressman Pete Strober, a Republican from Minnesota. And this bipartisan solution recognizes that the value of volunteer service, and it removes the financial barrier of giving back. So essentially what it would do is it would just say, let's get rid of this 14 cents a mile and equalize this up to the standard currently 72.5% rate that goes up every single year. So similar to the retirement bill I just talked about, we do have an action link available that I emailed to Lacey. Lacey, I only emailed that to you maybe an hour or so ago, so apologies if you hadn't seen that yet. Don't mean to put you on the spot. But there is a link available that you can share with your networks to let lawmakers know that this bill matters to nonprofits, to volunteers, and to the communities that you serve across Illinois. So those are the updates that I have of like things that IS is kind of working on. We also have some other things that don't yet have bills introduced yet that we kind of are working behind the scenes on, but I kind of wanted to stick with the things that are kind of moving and have already been introduced. And definitely welcome any questions and hope to see everybody at FOP.
Thank you, Travis and Matthew. Appreciate it. And we did grab the links you sent this morning. They're already in chat, so we're good. So if you're not following chat, there's quite a few resources there, so I'll point you to that. And we have a minute or two if anyone in the room wants to ask a question we haven't answered yet to Travis or Matthew. Now's your opportunity. You can use chat or you can chime in verbally. Any questions?
Hi, yes, I had put this in the chat, but I was curious about the oh, you did respond. Okay, it was framed as anti-terror. Oh, yeah, I just had no idea that the the bill to designate nonprofit organizations as terrorist organizations originated, I guess, prior to this year. So I was trying to understand the background on that.
Yeah, there was a lot of advocacy around that, particularly in late 2024. And
Okay.
Illinois actually had 3 Democrats on that bill in the original inception of it, and then they peeled off later as a result of a lot of advocacy. And that was true in quite a few states when the nonprofit sector really rose up together to talk about how that could be abused. And so now we're in a different Congress, so they had to introduce a new bill, and we're not seeing the same level of bipartisan support as a result of that advocacy. I don't know if Travis or Matthew want to comment further, but it's something we'll be watching closely this year.
Yeah, I would just build on that. So this bill kind of popped up toward the end of 2024, and it had a vote very quickly, actually outside of regular order. So it required a supermajority for passage in the House. And I can't remember the exact number off of my head, but there were a lot of Democrats who joined that. It was broadly bipartisan, but it did not get the number of votes needed to pass because it needed that supermajority number since they were operating outside of regular order. Since they did not get that number, they decided to come back a couple weeks later under regular order, where it would only need a simple majority to pass. And in that time, all of us, all of our organizations really just hit hard to stop that from happening again. And although it did pass, 34 Democrats who had previously voted for it just a couple weeks earlier switched their vote to a no vote. And to me, that's one of the most impressive numbers I've ever seen in the amount of time I've done this. Lawmakers typically don't want to contradict themselves. So to do it, to be willing to admit that they got this wrong and contradict themselves and to flip their votes in just such a short period of time was an impressive feat for all of us on this call who participated with that. Congressman Lloyd Doggett is a Democrat from Texas who has been working very hard to keep Democrats off of this bill, and so we've been working closely with his office on that too.
And I would just add that we've always, even since the time that Travis mentioned, we've always seen the Senate as a backstop. There's really no appetite that we've seen in the Senate to entertain this type of legislation, and we continue to make sure that we have that sort of strategy in our back pocket just in case.
So just to clarify, did this directly stem from the October 7th uh, attack on Israel and the resulting war, or has this been an ongoing kind of threat to nonprofits, since their existence? And maybe
So
that's
I
kind
would say,
of, go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Nope.
I just saw Matthew come off mute also.
Go ahead, Travis. You can go first.
Okay, so I was going to say I think that that is part of it. So it did a lot. Part of it was born of these, uh, protests that we've seen on college campuses since what has started playing out between Palestine and Israel. We've also seen this, like I said, pop up in different ways throughout and in different versions. There was one regarding student loans recently that is kind of similar language. We're seeing, but our main concern is, that this did pop up this way, and that this is kind of the justification, though in a lot of ways it seems like it is a solution in search of a problem. Like we are not seeing these types of problems actually existing. We obviously, nobody on this call, I'm going to make the assumption, nobody on this call supports nonprofits who are supporting terrorism, but that is like such a small number of people out there, or that it's practically non-existent. I would say I've never heard of a case of it. I guess I can't say for sure it's never happened, but I've never heard of it happening. But there are regulations in place. If a nonprofit is indeed violating, there are certain rules that you have to abide by to keep your 501c3 status. And if any nonprofit is breaking those rules, whether it be funding terrorism or some other mechanism that you're breaking those rules, there are safeguards in place at the IRS to revoke that 501c3 status. So this kind of seems duplicative. It lacks due process. One of the things that I've heard from even some Republican offices on this, on the Senate side particularly, is one thing they don't like is if a nonprofit is accused of funding terrorism, the onus of proof is on them to prove that they are not. So there's not a presumption of innocence under this bill, which runs afoul of the Fifth Amendment. So there have been concerns there from some lawmakers as well. And this has been true in a lot of this that we've seen this pop up with Department of Treasury, with Department of Ed. So it's not unique to like this particular bill, like as we see it, but this is just kind of some of the things that we're talking about up on the Hill.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that to Travis's point, there was already a Bush era provision. I can't think of it right now in the regulations that sort of do some of the same things. This is post 9/11. To your point about reasoning, Sarah, I'll go back to what I said when we started earlier, is that there is right now an unprecedented convergence of threats targeting the sector in large part because of the view of some on the Hill of not liking what they believe the work of the sector does. And a lot of that stems from past racial equity work, et cetera. And so part of this is what you see is retribution dressed up as serious policy proposals.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I realized that, yeah, throughout history, this would have been an issue too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that that pattern we're seeing elsewhere where the um, the conflicts occurring in the streets between ICE and protesters are being, um, one could argue, exploited also to under the guise of going after fraud, and so there's kind of this
Exactly.
like we're in this era of like things that they may intend to pursue are they're leveraging current moments and current crises to pursue policies they probably would have wanted to pursue under any circumstances. So we're keeping a careful eye on all that, and um, it we can't comment on the question related to Danny Davis's campaign at all in this space. That's not an area we can go into, but if there's a comment in chat about can you speak to how the transition with the Philanthropy Caucus might be handled when Danny Davis retires? Is there any plan for that?
I think that's something where we talked about prior to relaunching, and it continues to be one a wait and see approach. We know that we're gaining more members of Congress to the caucus, and the likelihood would be that it will be another Democrat on Ways and Means. So, do we have that person? No, right now, no. A lot could change between now and next year.
Sure.
So, just that is we're not oblivious to that. So we're
Yeah,
working
we
on
have an eye on it. Thanks.
it.
Appreciate that. For the sake of time, we need to move into our state portion. Lacey, if you can go ahead and advance. And as we do that, just a huge thank you to Matthew and Travis, who I understand may need to sign off. And that's okay. We appreciate your time. And if not, you're also welcome to stay. I will quickly mention census work here and come back to it when we get to our efforts at the state level on this. But we want to flag for you that we are watching carefully efforts at the federal level to change the census form. There's one bill that has moved in the House out of committee that would add a citizenship question to the census form, which is something that I know many folks in the sector will oppose when and if there's a floor vote on that. And there are other bills floating around too, but this is the one moving is HR 151. So we've got an eye on that, and we're going to talk more about our efforts on the road to Census 2030 shortly when we come up to that portion of our state agenda. So for the sake of time, I need to move on, and I won't have time to cover some of these other issues here. But if folks have questions about the Johnson Amendment or other sector defense, we can address those at the end. So we're going to move into our state agenda now. If folks have lingering questions about federal stuff, you can still use chat. So on the next slide, we'll just give you a quick snapshot of how our state agenda is shaping up. And I'm going to go into more detail on the government contracting reform package and then hand it off to the rest of our panelists to cover some of these other issues. So on the next slide, I'll dive into the contracting reform. So as you all may remember, those of you that have followed our work for a time, several years ago, we began to work with a large coalition to reform how the state manages grants and contracts and the timeliness and predictability of payments on those contracts. And I personally am serving as the chair of a government contracting subcommittee that's convened under the Health and Human Services Coalition, which is led by the Illinois Partners for Human Service, and a lot of our other statewide trade organizations participate in that. Many of you are friends with those organizations or members of those organizations. So that group of leaders has been meeting actively for several years and working on legislation together. And this package of bills that we're introducing this year all work together to reform how the state manages grants and contracts end to end. And it's intended to ensure that nonprofits that do business with the state experience more stability and can achieve their missions and do the work that the state has outsourced to them without cash flow problems and taking out lines of credit or personal loans in order to cover payroll and so on. So this work also has serious racial equity implications for a couple of reasons. First, our joint research in 2023 showed that nonprofits that experience delays in their grants and contracts are more likely to be small organizations, which are more likely to be led by and serving persons of color. Second, when agencies experience delays in getting a grant or contract in place or experience cash flow challenges once the contract is in place, the people they work with may experience interruptions in service. And many of our organizations are focused on serving communities of color and other marginalized groups. So we understand the equity implications here are enormous, in addition to the practical challenges that arise when contracts are delayed. So I can go into more detail if folks have questions about the findings of that research, but for now I'll move on. And what I wanted to share first on the next slide, or this slide, sorry, is the first bill in this 3-bill package this year pertains to the Government Affordability or Government Accountability and Transparency Act, or GATA. And this bill, the first of the 3, is aimed at eliminating confusion among state employees and nonprofit staff that can slow down the process when grants are administered because they don't answer the questions that folks have the same way. And it can also, it's intended to give providers more flexibility about what is allowable as an indirect cost and the allowable percentage of indirect costs in a grant. And we're trying to make sure that grant-making agency staff all have the same basic working knowledge of how the Prompt Payment Act works, how vendors become eligible for advance payments rather than reimbursements, and the role of the Court of Claims process. And most importantly, this bill requires state agencies to issue grant agreements within 60 days of the effective date, which in most cases would be by the end of August. And where in reality, we're seeing many times grants, the contracts aren't executed until well past that, into 6 or 7 months into the fiscal year. So this bill is intended to ensure that grant contracts and grant agreements are executed promptly so that payment can begin promptly following that as well. And the bill clarifies what information must be in a grant agreement so that providers understand when their agreement is subject to the Prompt Payment Act, at what timeframes and basic terms they will send bills to the grant-making agency, and when the agency will send vouchers to the controller, and what kind of payment methodology will be used. So whether it's reimbursement or advance payment. So all those things are clearly spelled out in the grant agreement, which currently is not the case. So we've seen over time that all of these things are points of confusion among agency staff and vendors in the field. And so this bill is aiming to clean those things up and builds on the success we had last year, improving GATA for the first time. So we're waiting on the House bill for the GATA bill still, but the Senate bill is available and it's sponsored by Senator Porfirio. And in the House, that bill will be sponsored by Rep. Jimenez once it's available. And so the lead advocate on this bill is Illinois Partners for Human Service, but we're working closely with them as well. So on the next slide, Bill 2 of 3. So this bill addresses the Prompt Payment Act, whereas the last one is focused on GATA. And this bill directly targets the timeliness of payments after grant agreements and contracts are in place. So the first bill addresses the timeliness of executing the contract and grant agreement, and this bill then addresses the timeliness of payments that follow that contract process. So the bill conforms statute to existing administrative rule that is not well enforced, that requires the state to pay bills within 30 days. And just like we get an email confirmation every time we buy something online, this bill requires state agencies to notify folks when they receive a bill from you within a certain amount of time. Along with other provisions, it will generally shed more light on where a bill is at in each part of the process, which is currently kind of a black hole where contractors don't know where their bill is in the process of review. So this second of 3 bills is focused on the payment process. And then finally on the next slide, this bill, this third of 3 bills, is focused on the Court of Claims, which is where bills go essentially when the state fails to pay a bill before the end of the lapse period at the end of each fiscal year. So specifically, with this bill, we're aiming to make it easy to settle a claim when a claim is an uncontested small, which we define as less than $2,500, a small bill that's uncontested and exists only because the state was late and didn't close it out before the end of the fiscal year lapse period. So in those cases, which are the majority of the claims handled by the court, the process we believe should be handled administratively and quickly, and folks shouldn't have to actually go to court or hire an attorney or wait 9 months to get paid money that they're clearly owed for work that's complete just because the state was tardy in paying their bill. So combined, these three bills should greatly improve the process for everybody at each stage. It won't fix every problem, but it would be a huge step forward. We're still getting a lot of resistance on these bills, but we've come a long way. We've been negotiating directly with all of the impacted entities for years, and Gombe in particular has helped advise us on language in these new bills. And our main goal this spring is to get these bills assigned to committee in both chambers and have hearings so we can continue negotiations and hopefully see these bills move for the first time. So folks that are affected by these problems, we need to hear your stories. And we urge you to make sure you're signed up for our action center so you'll be alerted directly when and if there are hearings on any of these bills. And some of our partners are in the room, I know today on this, and you can reach out to the staff at ICOI, Illinois Collaboration on Youth, who's leading on the Court of Claims bill, or Illinois Partners for Human Service, who's leading on the GATA bill. Anytime, we're all kind of working on it together and we can connect you to the right folks or answer questions about any of these. So I'm going to pause. If there's questions on these bills, please share them in chat. And also take note of all the links Sebastian shared related to the contracting efforts in chat. And next up, we have Erin from the Treasurer's Office, who's going to cover updates to the nonprofit investment pool and next steps. Erin, go ahead.
Thank you, Holly. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to brief you on Senate Bill 2968. It's the legislation that we are pursuing again this year to create a nonprofit investment pool for Illinois nonprofits. So what the bill does is it authorizes the state treasurer to establish a nonprofit investment pool and an electronic payment processing program that's modeled after the successful Illinois Funds and e-pay programs that currently serve our local governments. Illinois Funds has been around for 50 years and e-pay for almost 25. So we want to extend that expertise to our local charitable organizations. So the goal is to help these organizations earn a better investment return and access lower cost financial services than what you typically get from your traditional financial institution. So how it works is similar to the Illinois Funds, which is our $20 billion local government investment pool. Participating nonprofits would pool their money together. The treasurer's office invests those funds professionally, providing better returns, lower fees, and enhanced security beyond the certificate of deposit or savings account that are typically offered by your local bank. We have, in the 50 years, we have never broken the buck. All of our funds are managed in-house by fellow state employees, not farmed out to anyone that is chasing yield, but rather we're focusing on safety, liquidity, and then a competitive return in those orders. Nonprofits would also gain access to our modern and secure electronic processing payment system with fees that are significantly lower than what most nonprofits are charged today by the marketplace. And this concept is not new. Our colleagues in Pennsylvania have operated this pool successfully for hundreds of nonprofit organizations that have a combined assets of nearly 300 million. So why this matters is that we had over 150 Illinois nonprofits support our previous version of this bill, and including Forefront, who was one of our biggest supporters. But the Illinois AFL-CIO, Illinois Environmental Council, the Boys and Girls Club of Central of Illinois, Women Employed, and numerous other grassroots community organizations. And we're hoping to double that. So when nonprofits earn more on their investments, they can reinvest those dollars into the mission, into serving our communities. And it's especially critical, as we've heard today, of, in these economically challenging times, when your revenues are under pressure, every penny matters. So let's address the elephant in the room. Last year, the governor vetoed the previous version of the bill, Senate Bill 246, and it passed both chambers of the General Assembly. But the governor has expressed some concerns that the bill would allow extremist groups to exploit state services and resources. He cited, an example of Indiana nonprofit linked to the Oath Keepers that could have been eligible to participate under previous language. We've revised SB 2968 to directly address the governor's concerns through two key language changes. First, we will require that the nonprofit organizations be located in Illinois in order to participate in our pool and payment program. This would directly address his concern about out-of-state extremist groups. Secondly, we will require that Illinois registered nonprofit organizations comply with the provisions of the Illinois Human Rights Act in order to participate in our programs. This would ensure that the organizations are operating in accordance with our strong anti-discrimination standards, and in order for them to benefit from state investment services. The bill still upholds the original intent, but it is giving clear guardrails that would prevent bad actors from participating. So we think this is a common sense solution. And one of the things that I am so grateful to be on the call today is we're looking for additional support for a bill. I have a link there. I think Lacey or Holly will drop it in the chat, but we're looking for your support. We have built out a web page where we will update with our fact sheets, with the bill numbers as they are updated. We have a sign on. If you could sign, if were a supporter and you want to continue that support, that you sign up and express that, and we will keep you in the loop with any communications about the progress of the bills, notify you when we need witness slips filed. But we want to make sure that we get this across the finish line, because we've got a lot of really talented people here at the office that are ready to serve nonprofits and help you get returns beyond what our banks are giving you. So if later on, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Erin. Great job. And just want to support with a couple comments. One, we understand the legitimate concerns raised by the governor around extremist groups. None of us want or benefit from extremist groups in the charitable sector, so that's a shared value. And sometimes this is how good public policy is made. There's negotiations and things get better in the long run. And we feel like this bill now is in a better place, and that hopefully it will pass this spring, because we've found a way to address the concerns raised by the governor. So we encourage folks to take a look, and this won't solve everybody's financial problems, right? Especially now when challenges are so great, but it's a tool in the toolbox, and a practical one. And so we appreciate anytime any state official is willing to do practical things to support the charitable sector. we're going to be there to cheer you on. So we appreciate you, and also the willingness to negotiate and make the bill better. So take a look. And if folks have questions or concerns, if you would let us know. And we will also keep folks posted through our Action Center about when and if this bill moves. But if you want to sign your organization on for support, I would encourage you to do that on the link to the treasurer's page, which we've shared in chat. That's the best way for them to have a solid list of organizations behind this bill. For the sake of time, we need to move on. But if Erin or Sarah, Erin's colleague Sarah is also in the room, if there are additional questions, we'll keep an eye on chat and we'll work with you to get those answered. So thanks so much for your time. I'm going to hand it off to Jared now, who's going to cover another positive development. Thanks, Jared. Take it away.
Thanks, Holly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jared Hoffman, the Senior Legislative Associate for State Government Affairs at Jewish United Fund. Thanks to Forefront for having me on today to speak about the LIFT initiative, which stands for Legacy Impact Through Fair Transfers. This legislation has been introduced as House Bill 4206 by State Rep. Jennifer Gahn-Gershowitz and Senate Bill 2748 by State Senator Robert Martwick. LIFT addresses a challenge facing 501c3 charities across Illinois that has come to the attention of Forefront and JUF. Specifically, we've heard widespread complaints from charities that are struggling to receive gifts left to them by deceased donors through non-probate assets, where the charity is named as a beneficiary, such as retirement accounts, transfer on death accounts, and other beneficiary designations that fall outside of a will or trust. While the Illinois Probate Act governs transfers made through wills and trusts, Illinois has no law that sets standards requiring financial institutions to timely transfer non-probate gifts to charitable beneficiaries. This lack of a standard has led to significant delays in gift transfers, inconsistent practices among financial institutions, and in some cases, charity staff and board members being subject to personal financial and privacy disclosure risks as part of the gift transfer process. LIFT intends to create a clear, efficient, and predictable process so that charitable organizations can receive these gifts that deceased donors left for them and intended for them without unnecessary hurdles or long delays. A major obstacle that charities are facing when trying to access these gifts includes the fact that many financial institutions require charities to establish new accounts with them to transfer these types of gifts. This is an unnecessary step that not only slows down gift transfers, it can also force staff and board members to provide personal information, including social security numbers or undergoing credit checks when establishing an account for the organization. This is inappropriate, invasive, and exposes individuals to unnecessary privacy and financial risks. And secondly, there are no required gift transfer timelines, so these transfers can take months, or in some cases we've heard years, and there's no recourse for charities that are simply trying to access the funds that a donor meant for them. To combat these delays and privacy concerns, the LIFT initiative establishes a straightforward process that protects donor wishes and supports charitable organizations in the state to put donated dollars to work more efficiently and predictably. The bill does the following. First, it requires financial institutions to notify a charity within 30 days of learning that an account holder has passed away and name the charity as a beneficiary in their account. Second, it prohibits financial institutions from requiring a charity to open a new account with them in order to transfer the gift. Third, it bars financial institutions from requesting personal information from charitable staff or board members as part of the transfer process. Fourth, it creates a simple affidavit process that charities can use to identify themselves as the rightful beneficiary and request transfer of the gift. Fifth, it requires financial institutions to transfer a gift within 30 days of receiving the affidavit requesting its transfer. And lastly, it establishes a right of action for charities if a financial institution does not comply with the requirements in the bill. The language is modeled on a law passed unanimously in Iowa last year that already proved highly effective for charities there in its first year of implementation, and at least 12 other states are now exploring similar legislation. Here in Illinois, LIFT already has a strong and growing list of supporters, among them the State Treasurer's Office. Thank you to them who are on. They're supporting this because streamlining this gift transfer process will see a reduction in the amount of funds that end up in the unclaimed property portal that's held by the State Treasurer. Additional supporters include an array of 501c3 charities from community foundations to universities to small nonprofits. LIFT is practical and nonpartisan, and it honors donor intent, protects charitable employees and volunteers, and ensures that charities and nonprofits can predictably receive these non-probate gifts and put donated put donated dollars to work serving their communities faster across Illinois. And if you're interested in signing on as a supporter of the bill and being added to our fact sheet, you can contact the Forefront folks, or I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, I would suggest folks contact you directly because it'll just save everyone time. But if we get anything, we'll share it with you for sure. But Jared, if you don't mind sharing your email, that'd be helpful. Just want to highlight this is another like really practical, hopefully bipartisan step forward. So we appreciate the chance to work with you on this and appreciate your leadership and helping getting it drafted. We'll keep folks posted on it. And for now, I'm going to hand it over to Naya. Naya is the budget expert in the room and known to many for a lot of her leadership on many topics in addition to homeless advocacy. So Naya's going to update us a little bit on where we're headed with the state budget, and I'll color in the blanks if needed, but I know you could tackle it. So forge ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Holly. And I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone at Forefront. You all are such a beacon of information in keeping us updated as hard things are happening at the federal level. Being able to count on a great synopsis from your team has really helped us in thinking about how we move forward and support organizations and individuals throughout the state. And so, next slide, please. So, we are currently, for folks who may not be tapped into budget advocacy or the legislative process here in Illinois, we're currently in fiscal year 2026. Our fiscal years here in Illinois run from July 1st until June 30th of the next year. And as we're in the middle of this fiscal year, we're planning for the next. I typed out FY27 in a document yesterday and I was like, oh, yikes. And so people are putting together people are putting together their budget ask and having those conversations around advocacy of making sure that the funds that they need in order to do this work is being lifted up with the right people, including staff over at the Department of Human Services, Healthcare and Family Services, the Department of Public Health, and other important agencies within state government. We are about 3 weeks away or 2.5 weeks away from the governor's budget address, where he will put forth what are the things that are important to him. And we will also see what his budget proposal looks like. In terms of what happens after that, we will see, hearings in both the House and the Senate on his budget, where both the advocates as well as the departments will provide testimony, and at the end of session in May 31st, we will see a budget. So in terms of what we saw for this previous budget, we saw it was hard fought. It was, in terms of Illinois, we have a structural budget problem. We are in a situation where, some people say we're overspending. I would definitely push back on that. I think we have severely underfunded human services in this state, and that is both for frontline workers, organizations, as well as impacted people. The governor often talks about the budget is a moral document, and thinking about what that looks like. Oftentimes, I think for my sector around homelessness and housing, we often are left with doing more with less. But doing I will say that the organizations that I have the opportunity to work with are doing the best that they can. So in terms of like the structural issue, we're about $2 billion short for FY27. In terms of what $1 billion looks like, I think sometimes we can't quantify it. There's this great video that I use, and if you search like what does a billion look like in rice? It will definitely show you what the difference between a million is and a billion. And so we have a bit of a deficit. But in terms of solutions, some of the things that we are hearing from other advocacy organizations, including the coalition, the Illinois Revenue Alliance, and I believe they had a action yesterday to kind of just bring forth their proposal. But what we have seen from them, next slide, please, is that they are looking towards looking at digital ad tax. This is something that they put on forth last year. We've seen Washington State as well as Maryland both um, pass digital ad tax for additional revenue. And there's been some pushback around it because there were lawsuits in the Maryland case. But it does seem that what Illinois is looking at, or what the advocates are looking at, is making sure that that loophole is closed in terms of, you can't stop an entity from suing, but you can try to put forth the best defense possible in writing strong language. There's some advocacy around worldwide combined reporting, and just making sure that as how we make our money is very different from how people who are million and billionaires make their money. And so their taxable income looks very different from ours, where we get our paycheck and taxes are already taken out. Oftentimes they're like their wealth is built on stocks and other initiatives like that, as well as putting money in Cayman Islands and places like that, where the government is not able to reach and tax those dividends. And then lastly, with HR 1, we all know that there were corporate tax breaks that were provided within that bill that are on the back, like done on the backs of people in need of food assistance as well as health care. And so in HR 1, and during veto session, we closed about two of the loopholes that were included in HR 1 that will have an impact on our revenue. I believe there are somewhere between four and five that are
Six.
left. Oh, six. Thank you. There are six left that are needed in terms of closure, and hoping
Sorry,
that
there's four left. There were six total. My
right.
bad.
So yes, I was like, I didn't think it was six, but yes. So two have passed, four are left. In terms of what we're looking like for the future. And just making sure we decouple ourselves from what is happening at the federal level so that it does not impact our revenue. Again, structural issues. I keep bringing up structural taxation or structural issues in terms of our budget. We The way that our tax system is set up in Illinois is incredibly regressive. Our paying, like when we do our income taxes, we are paying 4.95% of our income to the state as people who go to work every day. But you also have billionaires and millionaires who are also paying that same tax rate. We are one of only a few states that do our taxation that way, as well as the federal government does it in a progressive way. We've tried to change our tax system here in Illinois by doing fair tax back in 2020 that ultimately failed. But there are still conversations about, are there ways for us to retry that, thinking about the millionaire surcharge, thinking about bringing back fair tax, are some of the things that are currently on the table. those require a higher lift. One, because the legislature needs to pass referendums to put on the binding referendums on our ballots, and they can only do those in election years, which tends to make them a little bit more skittish because they're like, why can't we do this during non-election years? Well, that's how the Constitution is set up. And we then have to take it to the ballot, and oftentimes we are, dwarfed in terms of what we see the folks who don't want to pay more and the money that they spend on convincing working class and middle class individuals of saying one day you will be a billionaire and you don't want this taxation, or there's this distrust of government and what they will do. And so there's been conversations about how do we combine this with conversations around property taxes as well as around education, two places that people tend to agree on. One, that they want to see property tax relief, but two, want to see additional money going towards education. But again, it is, you are pushing up against a mighty wall in terms of trying to move things like that. We have seen the speaker in particular come out in support of the millionaire surcharge, but again, that also requires us to come out, or it requires a ballot initiative. I know we're getting close to the end of time, so I am going to stop, and I believe I'm supposed to hand it back to Holly, unless I do have more time, but I know that I've just talked a lot.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you. We do need to start wrapping up because we're closing up by 11. Sebastian's going to cover our efforts around census, and then we'll take any remaining questions, including ones for you, Naya. So if you can stick around.
Thanks, Naya, and thanks, Holly. I'll be quick. So part of our agenda for this Bring Us Well Everyone is Forefront is working this session to begin advocating for the state to start preparing and funding for Census 2030. To be clear, the appropriation that we are advocating for would not go towards Forefront. The line item that we're advocating for in the state's fiscal year 27 budget would go towards the Departments of Human Services, the Illinois Secretary of State's office, and the Illinois Department of Public Health. And that funding would go towards relaunching the state census office, updating the state census website, beginning a public communications campaign, and laying the groundwork for an advisory panel, a state commission. All these elements were crucial to the census in 2020. And so we just want to make sure that we are ensuring the state begins this effort now to start bringing together foundations, nonprofits, and state elected officials to ensure we're best prepared for the census coming down the road. Specifically for the Department of Public Health, the funding in the budget would assist with funding the Office of the State Demographer, which they have recently just hired and would be a huge asset for Census 2030. So recently, when we've met with members in the General Assembly, they've asked why now? Why are we already preparing for the census in 2026? A couple of things. Number one, LUCA, which stands for the Local Updated Census Addresses, which is under the U.S. Census Bureau, is an initiative that propels local and state and governments, and as well as tribal groups, to begin providing feedback and reviewing the Bureau's address list prior to the 2030 census. Usually this initiative takes place in years that end in 7, and since the state is preparing for its FY27 budget, we believe that this is an adequate time for the state to begin preparing that work and to begin participating in LUCA. Secondly, we are seeing challenges arise now that were not prevalent before, including mid-decade redistricting, obviously fears of immigration enforcement, people not trusting the federal government with their information, and other new challenges. So with all this coming down the pipeline, the things we're seeing now, we want to make sure the state is best prepared for Census 2030. There is a huge racial equity component to the census. An accurate headcount during the census allows for federal funding towards Illinois. It influences congressional maps and elected officials, and it really does help shape the policy systems and representation for the next decade within a state and even across the entire country. Everyone deserves to be accounted for, and we want to ensure that there's an accurate head count looking at the Census 2030. Right now, we're working with staff in both the Senate and eventually the House on this appropriation request so that hopefully we can get a line item into the budget for Illinois in its next fiscal year. And we'll be sure to update folks once we have more information on the legislators carrying that appropriation bill and where the efforts come down the road for the spring session in Springfield. And I will pass it on to the next slide.
We have a minute for questions for any of the state issues, and then we're going to wrap up with some final resources. Any questions? All right, let's move along. Sebastian, you can keep going. Thank you.
So there are ways for folks to get involved, and we have some related resources here at Forefront. So as Lacey mentioned earlier, sign up for our Policy Action Center. We'll be updating folks on federal bills, but especially state bills going on that will impact the sector and all of you. We'll be sending out timely alerts in regards to where the bills are moving and when we need witness lists and testimony in Springfield and other related actions. And also be proactive. Share your stories with us, how policies or current challenges are impacting your sector or the populations you serve. All of that's really useful to us and ensures that we are accurately representing all of you when we are in the state capitol and in Washington, D.C. How to follow federal policy changes. We have some amazing partners I spoke earlier. So follow independent sector and National Council of Nonprofits, the United Philanthropy Forum, Council of Foundations. Those are all great resources that provide very timely updates to Forefront. They also have great resources on their websites. And we'll also make sure to try and provide information when we get input from them on federal policies to all of you. Obviously, navigate congress.gov to track bills and sponsorship on legislation going on the Hill. Lean on your trade organizations for issue-specific updates. And lastly, follow Forefront's website. We have many valuable resources in regards to federal state policies, our agenda for this year, even sometimes local updates. We also have how to do's in regards to witness slips in the General Assembly and lobby rules in Illinois so that you guys are in compliance when advocating and speaking to elected officials. And where to find more information. Nonprofit lobbying rules, like I just stated. We have a couple resources here in case you aren't sure how to go about lobbying in the state. There's a hotline you can call and an email as well. And then the Secretary of State also has an email that they have for folks who aren't sure the lobbying regulations in the state. So you can contact that email as well. And the state of Chicago has their own rules. So if you're trying to advocate for policies or speak to elected officials in the city of Chicago, has an email address as well that can be utilized for any questions in regards to how to be in compliance with that. And then lastly, we're in an election year. So there are some helpful links there on how to register to vote and how to follow the elections happening across the state in Illinois. And then we have some upcoming events in the next couple of months. On February 12th, we have another virtual event, an Advocacy 101 for foundations. It's a great training that the policy team here at Forefront will be providing as well to folks in the foundation world. March 16th through the 19th, we will be in Washington, D.C. for Foundations on the Hill with our foundation partners based here in Illinois. We're going to try and meet with all 17 members of Illinois' congressional delegation, so try and register if you can, if you haven't already. And then on April 1st, we are having our statewide census kickoff for 2030. It's 4 years from the day when the census kicks off in 2030. It's also Lacey's birthday, so sign up for that if you want to. You get two things at the same time. We'll also be launching our Forefront Nonprofit and Resilience Hub. We just hired an amazing attorney who will be overseeing that initiative, and we'll be sure to update all of you on when that program is live and available to our members. And then lastly, this summer we'll be having another event virtually on the side for Ingata and finding related resources to government contracting and navigating how to go about state contracting as the new fiscal year starts on July 1st of this year. And then all these events are found on our website.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we've reached the scheduled conclusion of our time. We appreciate everybody being here, and we will linger for a moment if folks have questions, but if not, we'll send you off on your day, and keep in touch and let us know how we can support your goals this spring as well. If anybody does have questions, we'll take them now, but At this time, we'll go ahead and turn off the recording and conclude our official event. Thank you so much.